I'm also the chair of Santa Rosa's Community Advisory Board, and my day job is I'm the executive director of the Leadership Institute for Ecology and Economy. Before I go too much further into the program, I'd like to introduce Rafael from the city, who has a brief announcement.
Thank you. Muy buenas tardes a todos y bienvenidos a esta reunión. Queremos saber si hay alguien que necesita traducción. Para eso estoy aquí esta tarde. Y si desea la traducción, por favor levante la mano y con mucho gusto le vamos a traducir la reunión.
Thank you for offering to translate.
Thank you, Rafael. So just one more time to mention that this session is being recorded. So for those who want to watch it again, and encourage your friends who were not able to be here, we'll get you information on how to access the recording after the session. So now I'd like to introduce Vice Mayor Robin Swint, who would like to say a few words.
Thanks, Tanya. I also just wanted to thank each and every one of you for being here today. Thank you for taking time out of your schedules and joining us. I think we have a great speaker today to talk about how democracy is changing and how we can participate in democracy and how we can encourage others to participate in our democracy. So I think it's going to be a really interesting speaker. I wanted to thank Santa Rosa Together for working with the City of Santa Rosa to bring the speaker to Santa Rosa and to make this event possible. I wanted to thank our city staff for making that possible also. They went to a lot of work. Thank you to Rafael for offering to translate this afternoon. So the other thing I wanted to mention was that I think there are a lot of board and commission members here. Thanks for joining us today. This is a great part of what you do, and hopefully it will show us all how to reach out a little bit more. I'm wondering if there are any members from the Open Government Task Force, if you could just raise your hand. Karen's here, Peter Stanley is here. So we have been working on the Open Government Task Force to look at how to increase community engagement in Santa Rosa, and I think this will help our discussion. Thanks, Tom.
All right. Thank you, Robin, for making today possible for us. I would like to also thank the Open Government Task Force for all of your fantastic work to improve democracy in the city of Santa Rosa and open government. And last but certainly not least, I would like to thank Jennifer Toole, who is the city's civic engagement coordinator and a staff support for the Community Advisory Board, because she really did a lot of work in a short amount of time to pull this all off. So thank you, Jennifer, very much. So now I'd like to give you just a brief overview of our session this afternoon. And in just a few minutes, I will be introducing Matt, and he's going to speak for about 45 minutes. And I understand from Matt that he wants this to be a very interactive, engaging conversation, so don't feel like you're going to be sitting there and being talked at for an hour, because we definitely want this to be a dialogue and a conversation. And we'll have time for Q&A, and then plan to wrap up right around 1:20 and take a short break. And then for those who are interested, we'll have a follow-up conversation with Matt and members of the Civic Engagement Committee of the Open Government Task Force, members of the Community Advisory Board, city staff, to talk more about civic engagement and how we can improve democracy in our city. And this is an open meeting, and everyone is welcome to stay and participate. So before I introduce Matt, I'd like to say a few words about Santa Rosa Together, for those who haven't heard of the organization, and answer some questions that you might have about the group. So what is Santa Rosa Together, and what is the speaker series? Nonpartisan leaders with representatives from business, government, nonprofits, community organizations, residents, members of our community, and they've come together to really try and improve the way we partner with each other and with the city to make this a better place to live and to give everyone a voice and a role in the city. So I'd like to just pause for a moment and ask all of the folks who've been in the city to please raise your hands so we can acknowledge and appreciate you. So Santa Rosa Together got started with a series of 3 Saturday meetings, which says a lot for the passion that folks feel for this topic, that they would give up half a day on a Saturday to come together and engage in very deep and thoughtful conversations about our city and its future. And so in those meetings, we got to know each other, and we put together a vision and an action plan for where we'd like to head. And you should all either have a handout, or a handout will be given to you, coming shortly, that describes the vision and the action plan in much more detail. So basically, we're a group of volunteers who care passionately about making this a better city and partnerships. So part of the action plan that you'll see is a speaker series. So we all know that sometimes it's easy to get kind of lost in our own challenges here in the city and where we live, and we thought it'd be a great idea to bring in speakers from other cities who are tackling similar problems and opportunities to the city of Santa Rosa. And so the speaker that we have here today is the first in that series of speakers. So you can expect to see in future months speakers from cities like Portland, maybe Seattle, East Coast. The planning team is hard at work in arranging speakers to come and share their information with us. So with that, I think I would like to now introduce our featured speaker for today, Matt Leininger, and he is the Executive Director of the Deliberative Democracy Consortium, DDC for short, which is an alliance of the major organizations and leading scholars working in the field of deliberation and public participation. The DDC represents more than 50 foundations, nonprofit organizations, and universities, all collaborating to support research activities and advance democratic practice in North America and around the world. Matt is also an author of a book called The Next Form of Democracy, which trace the recent shifts in the relationship between citizens and government and examines how these trends are reshaping politics. He recently led a working group that produced a model ordinance on public participation, and he also worked extensively with local governments to help them strengthen local democracy. There's a lot more that I can say about Matt, but I want to let Matt share his wisdom with you. So I think, as you can see from just this brief snapshot, that Matt has done a tremendous amount of work over the last 18 years and is one of the best, if not the best, authorities to share this information with us. So we're very fortunate and happy to have Matt here with us today, and thank him for spending the afternoon with us. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Matt.
Thank you, Tanya. And thank you to all of you, people in the city, people in Santa Rosa together who made this happen. A lot of work goes into all the stuff that you're doing together. And I particularly want to thank one person, which is my friend Hank Topper, who I've known since long before he came to Santa Rosa. I knew him when he was at the EPA, and as you may or may not know, Hank was a pioneer in doing public participation work in EPA, in a federal agency, which is not always an easy place in which to do public engagement. And he did a lot of terrific stuff. And one of the things that he has taught me, and I've used from him and some of the things I've written, is that when you're doing engagement, it takes commitment, leadership, passion from people inside public institutions, and it also takes commitment, leadership, passion from people outside public institutions. And what's exciting about this is I think what I'm seeing is a lot of both, so that's really encouraging for me, because I like to see this kind of stuff happen. So I work for this thing called the Deliberative Democracy Consortium, which is a bunch of different organizations, and it's got one half nonprofit organizations, operating foundations, and then the other half are academic researchers. And all these people are in this thing because they care about public participation and local democracy. Some of the groups here are nonprofits. Others are groups like, we also do a lot of work with national associations that represent being local leaders, like National League of Cities, ICMA, some of those different kinds of groups. By the way, as you might be able to tell by now, I talk fast, depending on how much caffeine I've had. So please, and I think it's terrible to be the head of something called the Deliberative Democracy Consortium and then to talk at people for an hour. So please raise your hand, challenge me on whatever I'm saying, ask questions, make comments, whatever. I'm happy to have as much of this as we can. And of course, we'll have time at the end, but don't wait for that if you have things you want to talk about.
So can I ask you right now?
Go ahead.
ICMA. Could you explain that acronym there?
I'm sorry, that's International City.
They actually help on things.
Yeah, the International City County Management Association is the professional development city managers and many other kinds of cities have. And they're not just in the U.S., there are other countries as well. So, for the first kind of half of my career or whatever, I was working for one of those organizations that I just showed you. And my job was going to communities, trying to help people figure out how to, design these public participation efforts. How do you recruit people? How do you facilitate these things? All that kind of stuff. So I was getting, I think, a good picture of the small picture, the how-to stuff of how do you do public participation. But it wasn't until, I don't know, a few years ago that I think I got a better sense of the big picture, you know, of why this work was happening. And where it happened was I was in this city hall in Lakewood, Colorado. And Lakewood's a suburb of Denver. And the reason I was there is that people in Lakewood thought it was a great town. You know, the surveys showed they thought the schools were good, they liked the parks, you know, they valued the level of services they were getting from the government. Everything was wonderful according to these surveys, and yet the city budget of Lakewood had gone pretty deeply into the red because 9 times in the previous 30 years, people had voted down local sales tax increases intended to simply maintain the same level of services. So the mayor's called this meeting, various kinds of neighborhood community leaders, and mayor's basically saying, well, you know, what do you want me to do to balance this budget? I mean, should I try to raise taxes again? Nobody's going to be happy with that. Should I cut services? People are going to be mad about that. What do I do? And finally, somebody in this meeting said, no, Steve, Mayor, you know, we like you and we think you work hard. But what we have here is a parent-child relationship between government and citizens. What we need to create is more of an adult relationship. And that was a nice image that, you know, in my mind, I kind of made me realize I've been seeing the same kind of thing in lots of other places too. This kind of dramatic, you know, generational shift in what people want out of the public institutions in their communities and what people can contribute. And I began to realize that, you know, people in lots of other places too, that, you know, we have less time to participate in anything. And yet we bring more capacity, more skills, more expertise to the table when we do that. In many ways, we feel more entitled to the protection and services of government, and yet we are less confident that government and other institutions are going to deliver. That we're in many ways less aware of what's happening in our neighborhood or our community, and yet when we find some kind of an issue, cause, a decision we care about, people are better able to find the information, the allies, the resources they need to make an impact on that issue. So you could kind of say that basically citizens, by which I mean people, are better at governing and less willing to be governed than ever before. And this is a dramatic shift, which is really rocking all of our communities, so many places, not only kind of in terms of the relationship between citizens and government, but in terms of people's relationship with all kinds of other things that they belong to in their lives, their neighbor associations, their professional associations, their libraries, their universities. This is a shift, and it basically has to do with the fact that you have these different 21st century citizens trying to work with institutional arrangements, which were mainly created in the early 20th century. So we've got a kind of a time shift in terms of what we're dealing with. In particular, this is evident when you talk about families with kids. People who have, in many ways, kind of the least amount of time to get involved in anything, and yet often, in some ways, the most at stake. And what's also interesting about families with kids is that, and I think this is true of lots of other people as well, but it's particularly true of families, is they want to be involved in the community, not just in politics. And that's a thread that I think you'll hear from me, and which I think is important. You see in lots of successful engagement is, to the extent it can be social and community and cultural, in addition to allowing people to make impact on decisions and issues they care about, that's really helpful and important. Obviously, another big part of this context is the internet, the fact that people have tremendous amounts of information available to them instantaneously, communication. Now, and I'll talk a little bit more about various ways, more specific ways in which online engagement is kind of changing the picture. So we got all these changes. And what we have still in almost every community that I know is an early 20th century approach to public participation. And this is it. I don't know if this looks familiar to you. This picture is from Cincinnati. It's Cincinnati City Council right after they've announced a decision to both raise taxes and increase services, which of course is quite popular. And you can see the anguish, I think, on people's faces. But this is a typical anguish. And I talk to lots of local officials, and they are just as frustrated with these kinds of interactions, with these very old formats of participation. You get 3 minutes to yell at or talk to your city council, and then you sit down. They're just as frustrated with those as many of the people who are young. Sorry, my phone rings in the middle of everything. So, old formats. And so what you see in lots of places is when people are trying to do new kinds of participation, they're kind of doing this out of desperation and out of multiple bad experiences. So like this guy who was the mayor of Lawrence, saying that what drove him to try something new was his awful experience with unplanned, unstructured public participation. With his mind, this means the kind of the 3 minutes with a microphone kind of stuff. What works in public participation, and this is a huge generalization because of course there's all kinds of practices and processes and formats for things, and you've got online stuff and face-to-face stuff and all in blends of the two. But I think you can kind of say from all this variety of things that there's a set of things that work, and they all have to do with this shift to more of an adult-adult relationship. That good participation treat citizens, unpack this and say, well, first of all, what that information, basically as much as they want. This is part of it. Another piece is giving people a chance to tell their stories. In these settings, people need to talk about why they care, how long they live in the neighborhood, what's their experience with this particular issue. They need to kind of talk and feel heard by other people, in many cases before they can do anything else. That treating citizens like adults also means giving them choices about policy choices, options for land use. People need to have different possibilities that they can be talking about with one another, learning about, and deciding what they want. People also almost invariably want some level of legitimacy. In any kind of meeting, any commission, any new something or other, you will often hear people asking fairly early on in the process to the school board or the city council, whoever has kind of helped them in this space. They will be asking basically, what do we need to do? How are you going to be using what we say? What's our role in this process? So thinking about how to kind of legitimize people is an important piece of this. People also want chances to take action. And I think one of the big shifts in this is kind of we need to understand that government and other public institutions can do lots of things, but they can't do it all. And that meanwhile we have this enormous capacity in our communities, the skills and expertise we have as citizens, the volunteer time we can contribute, the other organizations, businesses, other groups that we belong to. There's all kinds of capacity for solving problems in the community that can be tapped. And that part of the role of public participation and part of this different relationship is to try to give the people that entree to support some of those kinds of things. Good processes are important. I'll say a little bit more about a good process shift to adult-adult relationships, and then also, as I said before, kind of incorporating the fun stuff, the food, the music, the other kinds of things are a piece of this shift as well. Take a breath, drink water. Any questions or challenges? This is a good time to.
I have a question.
Go for it.
On your last slide, you talked about legitimacy. In the Open Government Task Force, we've heard a lot about closing the feedback loop. People want to know that they're heard.
Yeah.
And it is a very challenging thing to do in this format. And I'm wondering if you actually have some experience with how people have accomplished that.
Well, yeah. Sorry. Here. Sure.
It needs to be turned on.
Thank you. All right. Can you hear me?
Is it on?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. I had a question about the last slide, which talked about part of changing to a new paradigm between government and citizens institutions who are adult-adult kind of relationship. And one of the bullets was legitimacy. And I'm assuming that I may be wrong. Part of that is about closing the feedback loop, about letting people know they did more than words did more than just land in someone's city.
Mhm.
The words were heard. We have to communicate that you've actually heard what people are talking about. And I'm wondering if you have some examples of how other governments have accomplished that.
And the tricky thing about this is partly that people, even when they're, I mean, the basic answer obviously is simply, that you issue a report, you're in the next kind of city council meeting, or verbally and also online and in print, you are kind of acknowledging and kind of explaining what how the input was used. So that's the most basic answer. The hard thing about that is that it doesn't get to people. And so this is one of the big drawbacks with even with the most successful kinds of participation we're doing these days, in this country in particular, mainly because it is temporary processes. Let's get people involved in a particular issue, make a plan, make a decision, and the engagement ends, right? And it's not necessarily, it's usually very intense, and then it's over. There's not kind of a regular, more easy, convenient social pattern engagement community. So there's not, you've lost, usually, once the engagement ends, you've lost a lot of those conduits, those channels through which you're actually going to reach people. So a big part of this, I think this question of having people feel like they were heard is figuring out ways to sustain the engagement itself. Now, I realize the first piece is an important challenge, and lots of communities don't get to this one because they're not even able to, or willing perhaps to say how input was used. So I'm kind of assuming, so that's basic, that's the first bar. But the second bar is this question of how do you actually make sure that the message gets out to people. So what's working, some of the kind of the tactics that have worked, first of all, kind of is a very basic one, and an old one is recruitment. And I think more and more cities are starting to kind of, more and more different kinds of organizations are starting to understand that it's not enough anymore to simply call the meeting, assume that people are going to show up. That you have to be very proactive about getting people to participate in whatever you're trying to do, whether that's a meeting or some online thing or whatever. And by the way, this is just as true in the online world as it is in the kind of face-to-face world. Just because something is online, it's on the website, it's, doesn't even social media, doesn't mean it's going to get people. So you've got to kind of figure out in all these different settings, what do people belong to? What are their networks that they belong to? Whether those are kind of the church that they go to, or the the particular kind of social media circles they're in, whatever. What are their networks? How do I kind of expand this kind of web of relationships and relationships of trust, so that people are actually going to do and participate in some of the things that we're trying to get them to do. Another piece is kind of this is for the face-to-face stuff in particular, is giving them meaningful opportunities then to actually participate. And a very basic part of this is simply not always having, your meetings in like this. that you've got to have, if you want people to feel like they've been heard, if you want them to have real dialogue, if you want them to learn, if you want people to plan for action, if you want them to have deliberate over various policy choices, those are basically all things that happen in groups of no more than about 12. So a big part of the shift here is creating settings, and they don't all have to be like this way, but some settings at least where people can, in those kinds of smaller groups, do all those other kinds of things. One also, important process piece that really helps is having some type of facilitation. And this can, really vary, and there's all kinds of facilitation out there, but basically what you need simply in a lot of these settings is somebody who's going to mind the process and make sure that no single person dominates, and make sure the group can use the time it has and whatever materials it has, and so that's, and again, there's lots of different ways to do that, and the most common way now, I think, is simply with people who are volunteer facilitators who've gone through a couple of trainings or whatever, and are kind of called on frequently in their communities to do this kind of work. But there's other ways to do it. Another piece that's important is this piece of giving people choices, of framing issues. And this is something that's difficult for those of us who have some expertise about some kind of public issue. And often the reason you're trying to get people to participate is you do, because you do know a lot about it, and you do know that there's some things that you think the community ought to do. And so it's difficult to say, all right, here's what I think is the right plan, here's the right option, and that's A, but then there's also here's B and C. And here's the kind of background information you need to kind of absorb all of these things and understand some of the pros and cons. But again, it's a key piece, and it's a part of this kind of different relationship that you're not just kind of selling people a preferred solution, you're actually inviting them to kind of look at different other possibilities. And so please feel free in this context to kind of put forward things like that. Excuse me. Participatory budgeting. How many people have heard of this? PB. Okay. And it's something that's probably the fastest growing thing, not just in terms of participation, not just in the US, but around the world. In fact, it's coming a little bit late to the US. But it's basically a kind of a process that incorporates a lot of these kinds of good tactics. It incorporates some of this kind of adult-to-adult relationship, a process for getting people to decide together how to spend pieces of public money. The first place in the U.S. that has done it in this kind of wave of PB was Chicago, and that's the alderman there, Joe Moore, who started it. But a big part of the appeal of it, both for the elected officials and for citizens, is people have a vote. There's a deliberative kind of process that leads up to it, where they're proposing projects and researching things and all this kind of stuff. They're looking at these different options, but it also ends with them saying, here's how we want to spend this money, and so everyone has. And that has appeal for as I said, for citizens. It also has appeal for public officials. Part of which is that as elected officials are finding that these kinds of things, where you give people a specific choice like that, and they feel like they have some legitimate say, they're more likely to re-elect you. And there's a fair amount of evidence about this in Brazil, which has been doing PB more than any country. They kind of started it in other places as well. So there's a bargain here, which is I think a very legitimate bargain, and something that's making this thing grow. Obviously, you've got all kinds of online tools. You've got a growing awareness that we're not talking about kind of online communication replacing face-to-face or vice versa. It's not kind of an either-or type of thing, but basically that online stuff has specific strengths and weaknesses. Face-to-face does as well. They're better together. There's ways in which you can kind of include both online opportunities for people to participate and face-to-face ones. That's far more powerful than either one on its own. Again, a huge generalization, and we could talk more about the specifics of that, but that's, I think, something that we're learning. The online tools are particularly good, obviously, for providing information to people in a way that is convenient for them, and they can kind of get the basics of something, but they can, after several clicks, get a notion of other facts and information about it. They're good, and particularly for helping or allowing residents to also gather data themselves. And I'm talking about everything from, kind of online polls about things to See-Click-Fix, which gets people, have people heard of See-Click-Fix? Basically, it's an online platform where people can identify like a pothole or graffiti or trash in the vacant lot or whatever, and it's basically dependent, as many of these things are, on the GIS capacity of all our smartphones these days. And so you immediately can say, oh, that pothole is something that Public Works ought to know about, and then information goes immediately to Public Works. And then a lot of these platforms have then built into them things where people can then rank them. Oh no, that pothole is not as bad as this one over here. So you can, in a variety of ways, get people to kind of not only report public problems, but also rank them and decide what ought to be done first. In a related way, you've got all kinds of platforms for crowdsourcing or ideation, basically where you can say, okay, we have this problem or issue in the community, what do people think we're going to do about it? And various ways of doing that. The online platforms allow people to kind of, first of all, kind of contribute their ideas, hone and react to each other's ideas, rank them, and so you can come out of this with really a whole set of not just kind of ideas out of left field, but things that people have really worked on and researched. And then the best of those kinds of platforms also kind of build in an aspect where people are then figuring out how they're going to implement them. They're not necessarily assuming that it's going to be all the government or the school system or the health department or whatever to actually kind of make them happen. Lots of other online tools are good for helping people visualize options like land use, what's going to look like to widen this street versus that one, or build a grocery store here versus there, or budget options. There's some great platforms and games which allow people to balance their city budget. You can take things away from this department and add to that one, or raise taxes or lower them or whatever. You can kind of see the implications of some of your choices. But the biggest thing I think actually that online tools kind of provide is to engage with this capacity to allow people to maintain connections over time. I think that's really important because one of the drawbacks of some of the good stuff, but temporary stuff we've been doing, and I mentioned this a second ago, is that it's a lot of work. You get people involved in a particular issue or decision, and even when that's really good and it has an impact on policy or volunteerism or whatever, most of these things then end, and the connections, the civic momentum, the recruitment you did, all of that is gone, right? Until the next time you have a big issue, you got to do it all over again. And so what we've got now with social media and other kinds of things are ways to connect people or keep people connected that are convenient for them, but also meaningful enough that they feel like they're still part of something. And so the growth of hyper-local online forums like Nextdoor or just Facebook group pages, email listservs, these things have grown dramatically in the last 10 years, 10 years. And so there's increasingly people are connected in these ways that combine kind of some of the best features of the face-to-face relationships. These are people whose kids go to the same school, they maybe see each other in that context, but they also have this convenience and immediacy of this online connection. That's a really big civic asset that when you're thinking about participation, you ought to be thinking about. And then the last tactic, as I said, giving people a chance to kind of not only propose things that institutions or organizations ought to do, but also to figure out what they can do themselves. Jim Deers, who I think may have been here before, may come back again with this speaker series. He's kind of the founder of mini grant programs, basically where you're giving people $100, $500 or whatever to implement some kind of idea that people had for improving their neighborhood. This is people painting a traffic calming St. Paul or Minneapolis. And then one Jim likes to talk about is this, and you may have seen this, there's this freeway underpass in Seattle in the Fremont neighborhood, which was a site of place at night, and people in this neighborhood were talking about what to do about this, and they got one of these mini grants from the city, and they put a lot of their own sweat equity and creativity into this, and they built a troll. So, and that's a full-size VW Beetle pole. So it's a very large troll. This is now a tourist attraction in this neighborhood, no longer a place where there's drug dealing. But so, various ways in which you kind of tap people's creativity and passion for their neighborhood or their school, and give them a little bit of support, legitimacy, maybe a little bit of money. All kinds of cool things can happen when you kind of see people as problem solvers. And then the last thing, as far as these tactics is I think I said before, you want to make them fun. You got to think about, why would people come to this thing that I want them to come to? Why are they going to, whether it's an online thing, why are they really going to participate, given the barriers that they probably face in terms of time, other things that they need to do in their lives, going wherever they're going to go, doing whatever they're going to do. And you got to realize that for most people, and I certainly count myself in this category, I'm much more likely to do this, whatever it is, if it allows me to see other people I know, if my kids are somehow involved, if there's childcare, if there's alcohol, if there's caffeine, if there's music, if there's food. I mean, thinking about those kinds of important aspects and thinking about this as part of community, not simply about part of kind of public participation, is really important. So, having talked about social media, I also like to make fun of it. Go ahead.
In many ways, a lot of society, maybe some more rural areas and cities, but there's this tendency for communities to kind of bunker down, be in single-family homes, doing Netflix, and the whole issue about general plans that come in, kind of like, I don't want to call it tsunamis, but there's all questions about how that funding works, how people participate, and in that dynamic country where we're growing, there's police costs, fire costs, and density issues. Often people are better at peace in their beds than in parties. And I wanted you to comment on how this ability to perpetuate, to keep people excited and healthy rather than aggressive in nature has been working in communities.
So this is a very narrow, small question you're asking. Sorry. I think, first of all, I think that the desire to be part of things is still there. I mean, not for everybody, but as as a social want to be alone. But basically, we are more connected than ever, technologically. We're also lonelier than ever. And this fact that loneliness, that disconnection has, in fact, all kinds of interesting and bad public policy outcomes. I mean, on health, on all education, all kinds of things. So, but there is that latent need. And so I think that basically, this is partly me talking as a practitioner, having seen people do this. That when you provide something good for people to belong to, they really like it. And they often are surprised that they like it. I mean, we've asked them beforehand, why are they coming to this meeting, or why are they, doing this participation activity? The reasons they usually give are more issue-based. Well, actually, the biggest reason they always give is, I'm coming because my friend asked me, or my pastor, or my block captain, or somebody I know at work. People, it's relationships that get people to come, almost always. But second of all, they usually do not come with great expectations. I'm coming in addition to the fact that my friend asked me because I care about, planning my neighborhood, or achievement gap in my school system, or they give you issue-based kind of answers. When you survey them afterward, they almost always say, why was this valuable or not? They almost always talk about personal things. They value the fact that they felt heard, or whatever. They also value, they say, well, I also met Joe. They talk about those kinds of community level kinds of things as well, which is my version. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Anyhow, related question of people reluctant to give information about themselves and to expose themselves in public settings.
Yep.
Because of their concerns about privacy and how they're being watched in everything they do, and therefore reluctant to, sign up for something, participate in something, and get involved in ways they don't even know.
Right. Yeah, well, right, and that's the dynamic is going to be there probably no matter what you do, but it's a whole lot more intimidating with this, than it is for all kinds of reasons, technological, emotional. So part of this is creating a safe space where people feel that that's okay, and also that it's relevant. That their experience matters, and other people have experiences that are interesting, and you want to compare notes. So that whole question, and especially in this day and age, is always going to be a legitimate concern people have, but it really is dependent a lot on what exactly you're trying to get them involved in. Go ahead. Yeah, leave the barrier.
Have you found that there's a tipping point of what percent of what percent of people participating in the community enriches the budget? The whole point.
Yeah, it's a good question. There absolutely is a critical mass piece of this, right? When you're talking about a neighborhood or a block or a city or whatever, you need the number of bodies matters a lot, right? And so that's definitely why recruitment is like the first slide I showed. The most important ingredient for success in participation is that question of can you get it? And as a piece of that, can you get a diverse set of people? Diversity in all the ways one can mean it, but above all, can you produce a set of people who are talking to each other who can't immediately be discounted as, oh, it's that one of them, or it's that political party or ideology, or it's those people who only care about this issue. If you can show that whatever you're organizing has people who actually disagree about things or have different backgrounds or different parts of town or whatever, that's really important. Is there a number for that? I would like to have the data to be able to know. 10% is a lot. whether you're talking about a neighborhood or a city, I mean, 10% is a lot, especially if it's a diverse 10%. And particularly if we're talking about this, it should be various kinds of things that are open to everyone. So it's not, 10% doesn't have to weigh in. I don't, in a lot, very few engagement efforts actually get to 10%, and some of them are quite successful regardless. There are a variety of reasons they kind of get critical mass, and it seems like critical mass. So I don't know that there's kind of any, at least we can't from any kind of research space say it's got to be this many or that many. But the notion of getting as many as you can, making it as compelling for people as you can, and in diversity, and kind of thinking about different populations, what are they going to get out of this? Why would they care? What are the barriers that they face in trying to be involved? What's the history that they have in the community that makes them less willing to be involved? Those are always really important questions. Who is not at the table who needs to be here is certainly a question we keep asking over and over again. Right.
So I see sort of deeply ingrained sort of systemic problems between the citizenry and government. And what you're talking about is a real cultural change in how government engages with people and how people engage with their government. So at a big, much higher level, how do you start that? How do you get the rock rolling down the hill rather than pushing it up the hill? Where I feel like that's where we are. We're always pushing it up the hill and then we get run over by it because we don't get it there.
Right. Well, there's two different kinds of answers to this. There's kind of a, I think the more common answer we've had in this country about how to get started is you're picking an issue that people care about in the neighborhood, in the community, or whatever, and you are organizing things and you're trying to work with whatever allies you have, whether it's maybe you're in government, or whatever allies in the community that want to work with you, or vice versa, and you're trying to create a space you're trying to follow some of these principles in the course of a temporary kind of effort to get people engaged in something. That's generally where people start in this country, and a lot of that's good, and a lot of great efforts that have happened, lots of change policies. I'm going to critique that though in a second. This is part of the next few slides I'm going to show, because I think there's another kind of way to actually get started that I want to pose for you. So just hold that thought for a second.
So before 9/11, I was one of those community members that thought government was nothing but bureaucracy. It's unfixable, why bother wasting my time? Then when I saw how critical the issues were and how deeply impacted Main Street was by our foreign policy, that I consider some interest. I showed up like 3 minutes at a time now since 2003, both here in Wisconsin and Scottsdale and county, and trying to share what's working and what's not working. And what I really like to see for Santa Rosa is having quarterly town hall meetings and picking a particular subject or concern. And I say maybe moving out of here, the council chambers, repurposes, whether it's more room and maybe that would be a level playing field for people who don't like bureaucracy. In addition to that, good things about school just put on, we were looking to see how you can work here is discussing building convergence that just took place for the past 10 days. A lot of creativity was brought to that drop fund as well, bringing people together and truly building things up. How? So with the tragedy we have with the and then the dual tragedy of Disney Memorial. What I wanted for Sebastian, for Santa Rosa, and for our community, down. I looked at the difference in how occupied here in Santa Rosa was complete opposite of what it looked like in Sebastian. So it's a partnership in Sebastian rather than Sebastian. Well, I wanted to replace our tent in the studio, maybe longest of all occupied, with something beautiful that we built together, a gazebo that was in a park. That we put our hands in still. You sit in a circle, and so if you can have meetups anytime that you want, and you're sitting in a circle looking at each other, these can also be memorials. My loved ones passed away at the Civic Center, so other people can come have fires that you would do. So this could be the subject of town hall, how we put those pieces together, county access that land, start to build this memorial. And additionally, people who are technology savvy, there's something called Microsoft that's based here, and they know about them, how we take critical issues like how our parking meters, we want to reunify, how we can pay for that, and it gives the public a chance to comment. They can see what the people want. So I appreciate you all those things.
Well, that's great, and I heard, thank you, and I heard a bunch of things in there, and I think one of the things we thought about expanding the different venues, you know, is an important one online, and also, you know, spaces. I mean, this building is built for a particular type of interaction, right? And so, yes, one thing that in other cities, fairly common thing that they've done is actually go have city council meetings, have school board meetings, and other kinds of settings, other kinds of spaces that are set up for different kinds of interaction. That can send a message in a variety of ways, and generally fun for everybody concerned. And I also want to endorse the thing you were saying there about there's a common thread of giving people chances to build stuff, you know, to actually take action together, whether or not they were part of some kind of, you know, conversation, discussion, or deliberation beforehand or afterward, you know, giving them a chance to actually do things with their hands and build stuff online, build stuff artistically, you know, like control or whatever. That's definitely a common, you know, an important way to kind of expand the number of people and to do a lot of cool stuff. Hey. You're getting your exercise.
I know you've worked a lot with government officials, helping them to adopt these new approaches. I think that's an issue for us. Instead of how do we get our government to partner with us? What if you could talk a little bit about effective ways to get that adult-to-adult relationship going, started?
Well, and so I mean, one way, and you know, I'm saying things that you know. I mean, one way obviously is that's helped people, is giving people kind of pilot spaces in which to try things out. You know, have a meeting that, but having it at a very safe space, small number of people, that kind of thing. So you're giving people, whether they're inside government or outside government, a chance to kind of, you know, get a feel for what kind of thing you're talking about. Partly because whether we're city officials and whether we're citizens, generally when you say participation to people, what comes into their minds are the worst types of the 3 minutes on a microphone thing. So you're working against their definition of this, which is generally going to be a bad definition. And so you've got to show them experientially that there's a different way to do things. So that's, I think, one piece, and it's an additional kind of, I mean, maybe that's a 1A to the way to start, number one, that would be important. Let me get one more, and then I got one on to another. I'm going to give you another answer.
I don't know, I'm pretty loud. There are institutional barriers. Right? There are people deeply invested in the 3-minute situation. And there's a reason why the ugliest part of the newspaper is the announcement of public meetings. Because they're trying to get you to not go. If you have to look through the text for 5 or 6 minutes to figure out where it is and when, how do we overcome the structural barriers? There are vested interests trying to keep you from being able to trust them to make the decision. I love that part. I do not feel as though that's going to be an easy sell to the structure currently in place.
Right. Good. That's a good segue, actually. That's what I'm going to talk about next. Because I think partly, in addition to doing kind of great temporary kinds of processes, people need to think about kind of the structural barriers and what kind of infrastructure they want. Because basically what we've got a lack of civic infrastructure to support good types of engagement. And that, you know, civic infrastructure could look very different in different places. You know, you have different elements. I would argue that there's got needs some kind of specific building blocks, and so I'm going to lay those out in a second. But basically, you know, it's not so much that every community's got to have the same thing, but every community should have the discussion. And it should be a discussion about what kind of public participation do we want, and how do we want people to be connected in a variety of ways that's going to support better neighborhoods, better schools, all those kinds of things. And so, I mean, you know, to understand that there are real tangible benefits to that. And we have a lot of data which shows, as I was saying earlier, that when you have people attached to one another, when they feel good about community, when they're connected to other people in their community, this actually has impacts on not only on trust among people in different parts of society, but between people and public institutions, trust actually rises. You also have increases in efficiency. And this is something that maybe is part of the answer as far as what's appealing to the government in particular. One of the very common problems that you see over and over again in land use in particular. Some kind of land use decision is kind of in the offing, some kind of zoning variance or whatever, and city council or the planning and zoning commission or somebody says, okay, we have this thing we're going to consider, come to the public meeting. 3 people come. Nobody comes. City council, planning commission interprets this as, okay, well, I guess people are more or less okay with this. We're going to go forward. We'll take the next step. Architects will start drawing drawings. Engineers will start doing feasibility studies. The environmental people will talk about the environment. So, and then the next meeting, perhaps, where this is being discussed at city council or planning commission, nobody shows up. Guys, and the main reason people are not showing up is because the web of communication to get to them is very underdeveloped, right? So meanwhile, public institutions making more and more investments in something that people haven't necessarily bought into yet. A year goes by, substantial amounts of money have been, staff time have been put to this. All of a sudden, the news has kind of finally filtered out to enough people. Those people have had a time to kind of think about it, talk about it, learn more about it. All of a sudden, they come out of the woodwork, and you've got 500 people show up at the meeting to oppose whatever it is city council has now spent however many thousands or millions of dollars in investing in. This is an enormous inefficiency, which is incredibly common in all kinds of issues. And so I'm just giving that as a particular reason, but there's kind of ways in which kind of stronger civic infrastructure would increase not only trust, efficiency, but also, especially when you look at some of the data from other countries which have more established kind of sustained forms of engagement, that seems to actually reduce inequities and increase not only economic vitality, but also public health. You know, by the way, what are the top 3 causes of serious illness and premature death? Sorry? Yell out. What? I think it's on there. I don't think, at least Sunday I was looking at, it wasn't the top 3. I'm sorry. No prize for you. They're falling. Okay, 3 is obesity. 2 is smoking. Number 1 is loneliness. Right? So there are values to us having kind of connected communities. So what does that mean? And I think first of all, I want to kind of reiterate a couple things. If you're thinking about civic infrastructure, you've got to get rid of the assumption that government is the only problem solver. And so this screen is actually from Snow Crew, which is a platform I think started in either New York or Boston, I forget. But basically, when there's a snowstorm, by the way, California, there are snowstorms. The snowstorm, people go to the site either to volunteer to sign up to shovel out hydrants and driveways of people who, elderly people or people who are disabled who can't do it themselves, or they sign up to get that. So sign up either to help others or to be helped. Right? So there's enormous amounts of these kinds of things that are now possible and increasingly coordinatable through the internet. And then the other thing is this assumption that it's the job of government or any other public institution to be responsible for supporting, funding, leading, coordinating public participation. We got to get rid of that assumption too. Yes, government, public institutions should be part of that picture. They should be doing supportive things, but it's not their job to do it alone. So then the next question is what kind of...
Can I go back? Can I ask
Yeah.
you to go back to that last slide?
Sure. Go ahead.
All right. There's a lot of people who believe in citizenship, like the idea of participation.
Oh, sorry.
There's a lot of people who like the idea of citizenship and believe in the idea of participation in government. In this local community, as best as I can understand it, there are many people who are paid participants in government who feel that folks who may want to be citizens are more of a bother than a help. So there's a cultural difference that goes on, and we have to find a way to make it be seen that yes, we'd like citizens to participate, and that we can bring
the snow shovel to help snow out or bring out a driveway that's snowed in. What I've listened to here is great, okay, but how? Please begin to tell us how, so that the folks who are all assembled here and are on a paid position that may allow this in the future will get with us.
Okay.
I can bring a snow shovel to any snowed-in driveway, but if they don't let me, what does it matter?
Right. And you're asking not the how of how do I get their interest in this. You're asking the how, exactly how you do it. That,
Yes, sir. I want to leave here knowing that, hey, next week, when I get up here for my 3 minutes, thanks, sir, your time's up. It was worthwhile.
Yeah.
It always seems like it doesn't make a damn difference.
Right. Okay. Let me try. Give me, I don't know, 10 minutes. And come Wayne and tell me if I've given you the how. So, but meanwhile, I think we got to say, all right, here I'm kind of pushing you toward this big idea of civic infrastructure, and I think I need to define it. So, and I think, and this is the answer number 2 to your original question, how do you start? And it's a more abstract answer, but I think it's also an important answer. And that is to kind of say, let's look at the big picture. Let's not just look about, a particular issue where we want to engage people and where the how is going to be, how do I recruit people? How do I frame the issue? How do I create the process, or like all that kind of stuff. In this one, the question is, okay, what's our whole civic infrastructure look like? What are these regular opportunities that people have or could have that allow them to connect with each other, solve problems, make decisions, and be part of a community? And to kind of have that holistic sense of it. And then what might the different pieces of that be? So and here's kind of 3 categories of things. One, spaces for citizens. Where are people going to be gathered, in this setting? Are they going to be neighborhood level, school level? What kinds of spaces are there going to be for young people in particular? What kinds of spaces do we have kind of, at the city level that people can come together around particular issues and decisions? And then what skills or capacity do we need? What are the different things people know how to do, need to know how to do? Whether there's some of those kind of skills I mentioned before, or a range of other kinds of newer things, online things that people need in order to kind of, whether they're people coming from the kind of government side or the citizen side, the skills that people need to kind of do better participation together. By the way, some of the best examples of training are ones that I've seen are ones that actually have kind of citizens and public employees, public officials learning these things together. So Rochester, New York is this nice citizen academy training and participation skills where they've got people who are going through the process together, whether they're inside government or outside government, and of course in the process they are not only learning stuff, but they're also building some of these relationships and connections that are going to help them do stuff. And then lastly, what are we going to do about kind of the settings that are most immediately involved with decision making and problem solving? Do we really want to do the 3 minutes of the microphone? Again, I find, there's lots of people who, it's not just citizens who dislike those things. I feel they're unproductive. There's all kinds of people, city staff, and who are elected or decision-making positions who are fed up with those kinds of things. So there's a willingness, I think, among a lot of people to try something new. And it gets a little tricky because sometimes, and I'll say more about this, sometimes these kinds of bad formats are in fact legally mandated. And so there's things that one needs to be thinking about as far as that goes. But even when that's true, there's other things that you can do at the very least to kind of augment and buttress those kinds of things. Yuma, Arizona decided that in addition to their monthly city council meetings, they started this new thing. It happens in the first hour before the city council meeting starts. And it's a very open kind of process where people can kind of bring in topics that they care about. They've separated the small groups to talk about these issues. It's staff who are answering questions and part of the conversations in addition to the citizens and in addition to public officials. And so it's, they haven't changed anything about their regular city council meeting. Which then takes up. So this is too small for you to read, but there's all kinds of resources out there about that kind of give different visions or different descriptions of what civic infrastructure could be and kind of different ways of organizing this. This is from a guide from the National League of Cities, and it basically kind of says, well, you know, if you're going to have a good civic infrastructure, that means you've got to have information circulating in a variety of good ways. You've got to have people discussing and connecting in a variety of different settings. You've got to have kind of ways in which people are kind of giving some initial input on issues to public institutions. You've got to have opportunities for people to actually talk about different options that they care about, and then you've got to have ways in which they're actually deciding and acting on things together. So you want to have things in different categories. So getting back for a second to the legal thing, this whole question of kind of the legal framework for public participation comes up a lot, mainly because the laws we have on the books for public participation are, for the most part, 30 years old. They're pre-internet, they're all of these better practices for participation, and they're very hard to interpret because they're so old. And so part of the question is not simply what do the laws mandate, but how do you even know what the laws are trying to say? They will often, you know, put out mandates for public participation, but not even define what they mean by that. So we actually, I was part of a group of organizations that created a model ordinance, including some of these associations that represent and convene local officials and local leaders. And so the ordinance we created is, it kind of defines public participation. It doesn't mandate anything in particular, but it defines participation, lays out some principles for successful participation, and kind of gives some suggestions about things about kind of commissions or other bodies at the local level that would be kind of in charge or kind of overseeing public participation in the community. But we also, as part of this document, which is an